Tell me a little bit more about kind of the benefits of having the 12 months of data and the beginning of season data compared to only having it while the crop's in the ground.
I'll give you an example. In the Texas Panhandle, an area that I'm familiar with, those guys, they've got an 18-inch allocation per year, but when you take
18 inches of water.
Is their license per year. They have a rolling 5-year average. When you take that allocation is across the entire section, but the wetted area under the circle means that it's about 24 inches per year they have to deal with. Only just enough to fully irrigate a crop. But they tend to put, of those 24 inches, about 6 inches on, a quarter of their allocation on before they've even planted the crop. And that's a time when traditionally you don't even have sensors in the ground. So you need to know how much winter moisture you've got and therefore how much more you need to put in. Okay. And you need to manage that process. You need to know, do I put it on in 2 3-inch irrigations, or 1 6-inch irrigation, or 6 1-inch irrigations? And if you're not measuring it, you've got no way of knowing how well you're doing and what's the best approach.
So it's basically the old story, if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. And the current method, you don't have sensors in the ground, so there is no way to measure. So there's really no way to manage.
For sure. I mean, it's you cruise around the Texas Panhandle in March, and you'll see pivots running everywhere. There's no crop
before they have crop in the ground.
Yep, before they got crop in the ground, and everyone's irrigating, and that's the time when you're not measuring, and they really want to measure it. So this it's a game changer what we're able to do with permanent underground installations.
So let's take an example like a crop like corn, where I don't know, is the average growth cycle like 160 days, something in that range?
Mm-hmm.
So if I were using an annual install and removal type of procedure, I basically am missing the first few weeks of the cycle, and I'm missing the last few weeks of the cycle, which could be, I guess on average, like 20-25% of the overall growth cycle. How critical is it to having the permanent install, and is there the potential for even improved crop yield versus the traditional method and improved water efficiency?
So yeah, there's a number of things to break down there. So
okay.
At the start of the season, I mean, yes, you're correct. There's a period at the start where you're not measuring, and there's a period at the end where you're not measuring because you've got to pull it out again. And so that's lost data. You're putting water on, and certainly at the start, you're irrigating. And am I doing it the right way? But also, you want to see that root system grow in so that you know what's going on there. Quite often, for whatever reason, the sensors get installed late because it rained when you were out there to install, or the pivot was over the top, or something happened, and so it goes, you get it on the next cycle, which may be another 2 or 3 weeks later.
So there's a recalibration required.
Recalibration required. So by then the roots are already grown in, and you haven't got a baseline to work from, which makes it very difficult to really understand the starting point. And then at the end of the season, you can make a massive difference. I've had customers in the Oklahoma Panhandle, for example, that have had a 20 bushel swing based on whether they put on another irrigation or not. Now this was the farmer who had over-irrigated at the start. He had lots of water, and he'd put lots on early on, but what he'd done is he'd created a shallow root system. He'd made the plants lazy. So when he got to the end of the season, his agronomist was out there, and he was checking the fields, and he was going out there and sampling with a big 6-foot push probe, and he said, hey, we're sitting on all this moisture. It's great. We can shut down the pivots. And we had a look at the soil moisture data, and I said, well, that's great. You've got lots of moisture there, but you've got a really shallow root system, only 20 inches deep, even though you might have 6 foot of moisture. So it's like having a tall glass with a really short straw. Yeah. You're just not going to get all that water out. So by watching, knowing where the roots were, and knowing that actually was quite dry, he was able to keep irrigating and got an extra 20 bushels, which at the time was worth $6 a bushel, and that was a lot of money.